This is what they're able to do by the end of the lesson, and then each objective, each sort of element of that is broken down. And I always tend to run with, this is National Curriculum Level 4, even though this is Year 10, it's like 4, and then this is 6C up here, so it's all roughly broken down. The starter activity was homophones, it wasn't actually related to the lesson content. But then getting into the content was touching on sort of level 5 because it's evaluating its thinking. But then the practical things is in terms of an outcome and like producing something, I put that at sort of level 5 to 6 depending on, they're either going to do it at level 5 or level 6 level. And I don't explain that to them, I just say to them, you're going to do these 3 things. So they'll all do these first 2, but then how well they do this other one depends on whether or not their outcome is B or C. So I just wanted to show you how I do that. The whole debate pros and cons thing is done as a class. They create a success criteria about persuasive techniques used in media tests, because that's their LO3. It is explaining how persuasive techniques are used to attract the attention of the audience. So this is a handy technique that I stole from Alexa Skelding, who was the head of department at my first school mainly. And if you give kids an extended task, you can tell them that they will all create an audition flyer for a talent TV show which employs persuasive techniques, which is kind of the basic requirement. So all of them will do that. But if they're all doing that, that's roughly 31 points. That's just sort of below a D. That's sort of doing the bare minimum. Or it was the same as what, 5C, natural curriculum. Then you can say, well, then I would say that most of you should use a range of persuasive techniques in the audition flyer that they make. So they're looking, that's more like level 5 type stuff, that's more concrete D stuff. And then, because I've got 10-3 as well, they're not always working at that full 40 C grade. But some of them then might be getting to grips with linguistic devices. So they might, I will have shown them an example of something that's got some metaphor or simile or something like that in it. And if they're using metaphor and simile and personification in the text of their own advert as well, then they're actually moving much, much closer towards the standard required in writing for a C grade than what they're doing for that. So they can see, and they're either here because they've done the bare minimum, which puts them at sort of an E. They're starting to engage with the sort of meat and bones of it. So now that's more D, that's more concrete. And then when they're actually thinking about it for themselves, then they're working at a C grade level. So they can see whether they've done this, this and this, what points level they're at and how well they like. And they will get the opportunity to decide whether or not they get which LOs apply to them. And then I get them to hold up on one hand a 1, 2 or a 3, pertaining to how many of those green lights they feel pertains to what they've learned in that lesson. If they've only achieved success criteria 1 finger, 2, 3, and then I can get instant feedback from them.
I've just had a thought. You know, I used to get my students to write out the LOs, which just takes too much time.
Absolutely.
But there's no reason why you couldn't just have a little printout and to stop and check progress as you go along. They could just literally tick the traffic light, couldn't they?
That's what I do in my Year 10.
Well, if you give them this,
so that they could stick it in, which would show progress in terms of when we're marking books and stuff as well.
That really it makes the marking easier as well, because if you can print out your success criteria or your learning objectives, whatever, then when you go to mark it, you can just you just can highlight. So you highlight
what you're marking for.
Yeah.
The other thing I do with that is, at the beginning of the lesson, I go and I give them each a specific target. So I'll say, Ross, I want you to do 3 of these out of 5. I'll say to Luke Griffiths, I want you to do 5 of these.
My PowerPoint, my lesson is very similar, in the way you've got this, and then you can do this, and then this. So it is going up the levels. But I want all my kids to do it, and it's differentiation by outcome more than anything, how well they do it. But
isn't it also through your activities and the stimuli that you give them?
Yeah.
You know, the way you set up your group work as well, Hannah?
Yeah.
You know, it's evident within that.
So, Matt, when I was in foundation, I don't have my own lessons so much anymore, but we had to keep it very simple with what we expected them to achieve at the end of the lesson. So we had 3 group colour coordinated tables, which you come and helped us with, didn't you? Each table would have had a different set of task sheets that at the end of the lesson they would feed back on how they thought they did. Right. So for instance, group 1, which could have been our orange table, could have been working on more towards, similes, metaphors, personification. But then the other table would have done something more visual because they weren't so good at putting pen to paper.
You scribble that down now on there, Mark, in the middle. called the VAK, and coloured task sheets.
And I think this is where it comes back to our groupings as well, guys. You know, and we organise on our lesson plans how our groupings are according to data, but in the reality of the classroom situation, they can be different. It could be learning styles, it could be ability, it could be that you've set it up so you've got your lead learners on the tables and the rest are teammates. And this, do you see what I mean? There are different ways in.
Learning styles in that.
Yeah.
Good point.
Instead of differentiating by outcome, I quite like what as Hannah was saying. It's quite nice if all the pupils end up with the same task, but you've structured your different levels in different ways in order for them to reach that. So it might be that
instructions.
So it might be that your lowest ability group is just if you're doing a writing persuasive text, you're literally getting them to gap fill some devices. Whereas, I mean, well, the ultimate would be that they write their speech or whatever and include the list of persuasive devices you've got in your success criteria. But then you might have to break that down to the lower ones. So then your middle group, you've given a writing frame for and a word bank, and your bottom group,
and there might just be exactly,
so
and one group just starters.
And that's balloons then, because then your bottom group are just identifying.
Balloons, put that on there as well.
Your middle group are, you know, whatever they're doing, analyse, and then your top group are synthesising, whatever. I don't know these words.
How about if there's a student within your group, and I'm just taking it to that top end now, they've done all of that. Okay? Do we need to consider there's something else?
I have a real problem with extension work because I feel like I'm punishing them. Like, they've finished, they've done a really good job, and then I'm giving them more. Like, it needs to be, I'm just asking for advice because I think it's really
something
hard.
that I've done that works with individual students, or maybe a group of students, if you've got them off task at the same time and they're all completed, is whatever you've got next for your lesson, whatever topic or subject or thing it's covering next. If you've got an iPad or a computer or something that you can explain to them very quickly, you could get that group or those two or that person to prepare something to get their head around it first of all, and then prepare an activity. And those guys could do your starter activity of your next lesson, like they're your lead learners, so to speak.
Yeah.
And if you've got kids that aren't tools, like they will genuinely get their head around it. And like, for example, Zach Hems in year 11 loves standing up in front of people and talking. So like, I think you've got Bethany Smith in your year 10 class. She'd be great at that. That's something I've used to reasonable effect in the past with like the year 10, the year 11 class that Sue has now.
Maybe here we also look at exploring obviously challenge and building in vivos, extra vivos into, you know, the steps that we've got here.
Vivos.
Yeah, vivos and the rewards that we've got in place. Challenge, extension and Schoology. I think Schoology is the way forward, okay? Yes. And there's something else that stemmed off from there too, but I can't remember what it is.
I have a more simple peer tutoring way for extension, which is got from maths, which is once someone's finished, then you check them, they're an expert, and they
go around.
People,
that was it, yep.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's okay, that's not necessarily extension though, that's occupying them.
It's occupying, but because they're teaching somebody else.
Reflect on what it is and to engage with it.
It is.
It's very hard to get them to help.
If there's a specified outcome, yes, it does.
But you know, something like that we could tie into your role as a lead learner, your role as a team player.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, it does come into the peer tutoring, to be honest. Okay, not to the degree that we'd like it to be, but there is that element there that we could use.
I'm sure it's just practice of peer tutoring, but I know my kids tell them, they don't teach them.
Yeah.
They just do it.
Or it's just an excuse to sit and chat and experience.
Or, you know, or, you know, they can get, obviously it takes time to do this, but preparing them to do the show and tell at the end. All right, and I'm thinking, you know how, I think you do this, you've got the top of the projector, or is it you, Corinne? Where you can actually have a look at this work, and rather than you going through it, you've actually got the students saying, well, this is what I've done, and you know, and moving kids on, because actually kids do get tired of our voices, but they listen to each other.
I think self-assessment works quite well, because as long as you've got a success criteria at the beginning, which I think everyone does, like so your success criteria is to include, say, and you've got your list of persuasive devices, then just getting them to underline each example and you know.
Beth, I think you're right, and also, you know, the WWW, I tend to tie that into my self-assessment, and the EBI, that EBI, I'm like, oh, right, okay, you think of how you need to make it better, and they come up with some really valuable ideas.